Everyone. Welcome back to Let's All Be the Change, which used to be called Let's Make a Better World. I'm your host, David Tare, and I haven't made a video on this channel in a while, and I apologize for that. But I've noticed that there's been a lot of views the last few days on this channel. I'm very pleased to see that. And I'm pretty sure the reason is because of all the news about the Epstein files and how basically Trump is now burying himself by denying any involvement, which of course everybody knows is not true, including a lot of his former MAGA supporters. So I'm very pleased to see this. It looks like the country's starting to wisen up and realize what a man he is. And I hope he doesn't stay in office that much longer. I don't know what's going to happen to him. I think it would be wonderful if he ends up resigning like Nixon did. He certainly has a million times as much reason to resign as Nixon ever did. With Nixon, it was just Watergate. With Trump, it's the fact that he has 38 criminal indictments, and God knows what his involvement was with Epstein when they were friends for 15 years. Pretty horrible news, you know? And it looks like Musk has won. I mean, I think one of Trump's first mistakes was his big, beautiful bill, because it was so offensive not only to ordinary Americans, who can't afford anything anymore because he's only helping the rich and screwing people like you and me by cutting all of our programs. But, it even affected good old Musk, who wants to remain the richest person in the world, He doesn't want to cut into his $250 billion. And I guess that was the reason why Musk tweeted about the Epstein files, and it looks like it's finally taking its toll on Trump. I'm very pleased to see this. If only Musk had a heart, maybe there'd be hope for all of us. Maybe Musk can grow a heart. I don't know what's going to happen now. Part of my problem is I have a lot of anticipatory anxiety. Trump's presidency has been making me pretty crazy. But, I stopped doing the Trump smokeout feature about 3 months ago. I finally figured enough was enough. I'm not getting high anymore. I want to save what's left of my brain. I think I have a good brain. I don't want to lose any more IQ points by toking. I care about the future. I care about all of our futures, including my own. I'm already 63 years old. I don't know how much longer I have to go. Hopefully they got rid of my cancer. I don't know if you guys realize, but I have prostate cancer. Fortunately, they caught it early. And I had 9 weeks of radiation treatment, and in a few days I'll know whether or not they got rid of my cancer. They were very confident they would. But, I'll give you guys the good news as soon as I find it out, the good news or the bad news. I'll either live about 10 years or about 30 years. We'll see what happens. But, whatever happens, I don't just care about the rest of my life. I care about all of our lives. I do believe in karma and reincarnation. I hope my next life turns out okay, but I don't want to get into that. I just hope, I care about the well-being of humanity. A lot of people think I go overboard with that. Most people only care about things that don't affect them personally. I think that's a big problem. That's probably a big reason why Trump got elected to begin with. I don't think enough Americans things weren't bad enough for most Americans. We're still in the boiling vat, where the frogs in the boiling vat of water, and we're getting used to the slow warming without even realizing that we're getting boiled to death. I've known it for a long time. I guess I'm smarter than the average American. I don't want to brag too much, but I see a lot of things coming that a lot of other people don't. It's probably partly because I'm on the spectrum. I see things pretty clearly. People, Aspies like me, we have heightened attention to detail, and I've caught details all my life. I've caught details in movies, like I remember the Coca-Cola vending machine in Bullitt. I don't think too many people paid attention to that. And I remember the Sprite ad in the alleyway near Charlie Bucket's mother's laundry in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So I pick out things. So it's just kind of hard for to have a wool pulling over my eyes about certain things. I see what's going on, and I see more kind of general trends. I mean, I've said this before, but I was born in 1962, and I think we used to be a pretty good country. I remember vaguely, I have vague recollections of the 1960s. I remember it was a year of a lot of peace and love. Of course, I wasn't in Vietnam and I didn't experience it directly, but I saw the peace signs. I saw the graffiti in my neighborhood. I remember we went to the moon, which we haven't been back to in 56 years. And by the way, 2 days ago was the 56th anniversary of Neil Armstrong being the first human being to walk on the surface of another heavenly body. And we haven't been back in 56 years. So I think that's pretty horrible. I think we should have had the lunar bases by now that they were predicting in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. But I mean, I don't know what else to say right now. Right now, I'm kind of ranting, which I do a lot. But I think that I think there's hope. I think there's always hope. But I'm beginning to see some of it now. I think there's hope for the end of the Trump era. That's the first thing I'm hoping for. I'm hoping Trump gets the hell out of there, because he never belonged in the White House. He never did. I can safely say that. He belonged in the White House less than any other president we've ever had. He belongs in the White House about as much as Napoleon or Marie Antoinette or King Louis XVI. I mean, the guy's a man. That's all I'm gonna say. I could get in trouble if I say too much bad stuff about Trump, but I think you guys all know that I hate him, and But I think there's hope. I think there's hope for all of us. I mean, one thing I've been seeing even before this whole business about the Epstein files came out, I could see that not all Americans are as stupid as I think Trump thinks we are, including some of his MAGA supporters. I mean, the way Trump works is he denies any wrongdoing. Denial is his middle name. I mean, he tries to fabricate his own truth. He tries to fool everybody by telling the lies that basically say that he's a good person, that he's doing all the right things. He makes up whatever lies he thinks will serve him the best. And you're running out of lies, Trump. You're like the boy who cried wolf. You can't cry wolf anymore. So you're about to be eaten by the wolves, and I'm going to enjoy seeing some of that. Now I'm getting in trouble because I'm kind of implying I want to see him, something bad happen to him. But I'm not a psycho. I've always considered myself a good person. I've hardly ever hurt anybody my whole life. I've never beaten anybody up my whole life. I never got in a fight. I never started a fist fight. I hate violence. I do. I mean, maybe I talk big, maybe I talk angry, and I remember when I was in college, one of my friends told me that emotional torture can be just as bad as physical torture, and it's true. Words can hurt like a fist, and I probably do use a lot of hurtful words. I know. I'm a smart guy. I've got a good brain. I can deliver some pretty harsh insults, but, I gotta watch that, because it doesn't make me any better than a brute when I do that. It's not any good. It's not really any better to hurt people with words. So I gotta watch that I don't do that so much. But we still have, I like to believe that we still have free speech in this country. I think it's really one of the pillars of our democracy. And I see our democracy as being in serious trouble. Another thing that's really been upsetting me for a really long time is why the hell, are the people on the left, the people who are supposed to be fighting Trump, why aren't they fighting him? Why are they kissing up to him? Especially the people in the government. Why are the Democrats in the government kissing up to Trump? Why did they, why didn't they pick someone younger than Biden, and why did they wait until the last minute for Harris to get in the race? And Harris didn't stand a chance. She didn't have enough time. I mean, I liked her. I voted for her. I even campaigned for her for a month. I felt it was my duty, because my conscience wouldn't allow me not to campaign for. I thought it was so important that she beat Trump. I think she would have been a good president, too. I think it's about time we had a woman president. Not just any woman. It has to be a woman with a good heart. Not all women in the world have a good heart, unfortunately. I can think of several that don't, and I don't want to say personally who I don't think has a good heart. But I've known some bitches. We shouldn't have a bitch for president. I'm not saying Hillary was a bitch. She wouldn't have been as good as Harris. I did vote for Hillary too, by the way. And I don't care about the whatever email scandal she was involved in. I don't know the details of that. I think it was one of those things, the Republicans are just trying to dig up dirt on her like they do on all the Republicans and all the Democrats, like they did with Clinton. I didn't give a shit about Clinton's affair with Monica, by the way. It wasn't a good personal decision. If I was Hillary, I'd be pretty pissed at him. He cheated on her, right? It's not right for any husband to cheat on his wife, But I didn't think it played any role in his ability as president, and he's not the only president who's cheated on his wife. I think probably about a third of them did. And nobody used to talk about it. I even asked my dad once, what about JFK? He was probably the most promiscuous president we ever had. I don't know how many affairs he had. My dad's answer was people didn't talk about that kind of thing at that time. And they probably had good reasons not to. I think JFK was a pretty damn good president, too. It wasn't good that he had all those affairs. I guess his personal life wasn't so good. But neither was John Lennon's. I think John Lennon was one of the greatest musicians of all time. He and Paul McCartney wrote just about all the Beatles songs. The Beatles were the greatest rock group of all time, I think, by far. I think they were as great as Mozart or Beethoven. And, it's too bad that John Lennon was a jerk in real life, but nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect either. I've done some things I'm ashamed of. I'm not going to say what they were in this video, but none of us are perfect. We all have kind of skeletons in our closet, but I believe in karma, like I said earlier, and I think the trick is to have an overall positive karmic scorecard, so your next life will be better, because I think we all reap what we sow. And maybe we do have to pay penance for our bad deeds, but we get rewarded for our good deeds too. So don't forget that, But I don't even want to try to estimate what Trump's karmic scorecard is. It's probably one of the worst in history. Probably pretty close to Hitler's. Not quite that bad, because he didn't kill 50 million people like Hitler did, but he's pretty bad. He's the worst president we've ever had, and he's adversely affected millions of people, and I think he did kill about 1 million people, with the way he dealt with COVID-19. He didn't want to get anybody vaccinated, even his own supporters, and there were 1 million deaths in America from COVID-19, and I think Trump was, to a very large extent responsible for those deaths, which in my opinion makes him an even bigger murderer than LBJ. People used to, hey, LBJ, how many kids do you kill today in the Vietnam War? And it's true that there were about 2 million Vietnamese casualties, civilians that died in that fucked up war. But, LBJ at least felt guilty enough about it that he didn't run for president again in 1968. I think he died very depressed with just the whole thing on his conscience. And I think he had a good heart with it. I think he meant well. It was the Cold War. We were trying to fight communism, and it was a stupid domino theory. That was the whole reason we went into Vietnam, and he probably believed in that. Plus, he was a Texan. He had his Stetson hat. He wanted to act like a gung-ho Texan and be victorious. That was kind of his mentality. I'm not really excusing him, but, but Trump just goes beyond all that shit. God. He needs to get out of there. And I think that's about all I want to say for now. I don't want to get in trouble by saying any more demeaning things that probably insulted enough of you already. But anyway, those are just some of my thoughts right now. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let's make a better world. I'm going to end with a hopeful slide. I always do. I've always wanted to see a future in outer space. I even want to go to space before I die. I want to at least orbit the Earth at least once before I die. That's kind of my dream, because I think space is the final frontier, like they say on Star Trek, And, I think we have to remain hopeful. Maybe Musk can help us get into space if he grows a heart, But anyway, enough of that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let's make a better world, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.